morning and welcome back. I'm Natalie and today I'm going to be doing a floating canvas. So floating canvas is where it's going to finish in a frame. So it's literally going to slot in. And what I've done so far, well, I've pulled out a couple of stencils. So we've got the Pretty Posy and one of the Indian Summer stencils. And I've used a combination of texture paste. So if I hold it up a bit closer, you're going to be able to see which ones I've used. So this resisting one here is the white texture paste. We then have places that are thicker, and that's using the thick texture paste. And then these lovely nuggety bits are the marble texture paste. I've then attacked the canvas with lots of sprays. So I have the Blush Dreams Pretty Amazing spray, Flamingo Pearl spray, and then Heat Wave made into a spray as well. So that's just a little bit of paint and a little bit of water and give it a good shake. Then you can see that we've got some purple tones in here, some chocolatey tones. So these are from the Pretty Explosion powders Artemis and Mars. So that's where we're going to start from. So you can see that we've got lots of die cuts in the background, and as I'm working through, I'm either going to bring those out a bit more or I'm going to make them recede into the background, depending on which bits I want to emphasise. So first of all, let's do the hellos. So I'm Mum, and we'll wait to see if anybody else joins in, just in case there's any issues. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Hi Louise. How am I doing? Still wheezing well. So if I do have a coughing fit, Ian is here to hop in should you need to. You'll be pleased to know that he's not going to paint. So I've pulled out a number of paints that are going to go with the colours in our background. So I have Rose, which is this lovely pinky lilac-y tone, so that's going to pull a little bit from the purple and a little bit from the pink. We have Russian, that's going to emphasise these chocolatey tones. Pearl, which is going to be the pale pink. Gold Ice, so I've used this on my actual frame as well, so that's going to pull that into our actual canvas. Then I've got a couple of skin tone ones, so these are both naked, but one is in Get Chalky and one's Get Crackled. Now if we turn them over, you can see there is a slight colour difference, so that we can use those for shading as well. Then we have Pale Gold, which I'm going to use really limited amounts of because it's not going to match exactly, but a little bit won't hurt. And we have Tickled for any blush that we need to do. Jakeman's Cough Sweets, the black ones. Hi Taz! Yeah, I should be around for a bit, so be absolutely fine to drop back in a bit later. Going back to Louise's Jakeman's, I used to use Jakeman's a lot, didn't I? And then I found I was getting
addicted.
Addicted, yeah. And I was getting some issues with my throat and stuff, so it was like, no. Okay, so I'm going to start off with Pearl. And what I've done is, if I hold this up a little closer, you should be able to see I've sketched roughly where I'm going to be heading. So you may just be able to see the outline. And what I've used is an Inktense outliner pencil. Now the reason I've done this is, if you use a normal graphite pencil, what you can find is when you start to paint, it's going to actually smudge and blend into your paint and give it kind of a muddy colour. Whereas the outliner should be pretty water resistant. So I'm going to start off by... Yeah, overhead's fine. So if at any point you want to see the other view, just let Ian know. He's in charge of the cameras today. And let's get a little bit of paint onto my brush. And I'm going to go neat to start with for this first bit because I want to try and block out some of this colour underneath for the whites of the eyes. And I'm going to go around this kind of cog detail that I've got here, so that we can start to emphasise some of those and knock them back in others. But I thought it'd be good to show you how we can work with the texture of our canvas. So whether we choose to emphasise it or push it into the background and play. A little bit more paint, and I'm just going to go down that side of the iris. So there's only going to be a little bit just on that side. I'm going to do the same here, so just a little dot there. Okay. So when I'm doing this, I'm just trying to make sure I get into all my little nooks and crannies for this section. But then when we get to some of the later sections, we're going to actually paint around those areas. Okay, so far so good. So what you might find is that you want to do a couple of coats. So if we work with thin layers, they'll dry much quicker. That means that we can build up our colour. Is Amazon doing what I said it would do?
It's 7 stops away, so.
Oh dear. I'm one of those days. There we go. So let's let that dry, and you're going to want to rinse your brush out. Now hopefully when I do the next bit you can start to see where we're heading. Oh, I saw that one too well the other day. There we go.
I didn't say you did that one, not me.
Huh? Didn't know my strength. So I do keep a bamboo cloth to one side so that I can keep my brush reasonably water free. So just tap that out, get all the water out that you can. And then when we get into the later stages we'll start playing with a bit more water in that paint, but for these first few where we want our colours to be strongest, you want to make sure that you eliminate that water. So we're going for Russian next, which is this gorgeous black gold colour. So let's see if I can get to pick it up. It's a little bit dark on screen, but
see it on the rim.
okay. So just because I'm doing it a little bit of detail, I'm just going to rotate my brush so that I get a bit of a point going on, and then I can get a nice fine line for my painting. I'm going to start with this darkest section first, and then we can go and do eyeliner after. So again, just be aware of your bubbles in your canvas. Let me just see if I've got a slightly smaller brush. There we go. Just this one's a bit more bumpy on this side. It's a little bit trickier. I'm going to go around. There we go. And you want this shape to match this one pretty much, so just come down just a little on that side. Okay. So I'm going to clear myself a little bit of space on my mat. That's so that I can do a little bit of watering down. So let's get a little bit of that paint and we can give it a little spritz of water. So don't want to make it too watery. And we can always add more paint if it's gone a bit too wet. Because we don't want it to be pale, we just want it to be a bit easier to paint detail with. Okay. So I'm just rotating that brush and just try and get a bit of the excess moisture out, so that when we go and do our line work, it's not going to bleed everywhere. Okay, do the same over here. Just going to follow painting round we go on this top line, like so. And then a little bit underneath the eye, just there. Now while we're here, we can do things like the eyebrows. So just going to bring that in there. And then over here. So if you come up to something like this little nuggety bit here and you're like, oh, how do I treat that? You can make a feature of it if you want, or you can brush over it to knock it back into the painting. The choice is yours. So I just think I'm just going to brush into it. So I'm just going to tap that colour in, so it's going to blend into that background, like so. Let's move back to our nice watery paint.
Global player.
Alexa, stop. Naughty Alexa. Okay, so let's take our watercolour over here. Now while this is nice and wet, have a clean brush, a bit more water, and we're going to blend that out. But if you notice, I'm actually painting around some of the elements we already have on our canvas background. So I'm following any resist, so you keep pulling out that detail. And I'm also going to highlight a few of the die cuts that I've stuck onto my canvas. Okay, so just work at blending that line so you don't get any harsh black lines. Just taking that colour into the smaller spaces, like so. Thinking, can I put my arm in that? Okay, so I'm going to follow this hairline round a bit more water on my brush. And follow around the cog. Now with this bit of a die cut detail, I've actually got 2 or 3 layers of a die cut here. So it's really proud of the surface. So it's quite easy to paint around. So as we start to move out up into this hair, I'm just going to add a bit more water.
Mel says hi, it's just popped in.
Hi Mel! And thank you for letting everybody know that I had that little bit of a last minute schedule change. It's Ian's fault.
I was late.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I'm going to blend this around our resisted area. So this is where the white texture paste was. I'm going to soften that colour just there. So this saves having to basically paint the whole hair in one flat colour and having to go around everything. By blending it out, we're making our lives a little bit easier for us. Now I've got a few bits of fringe that are going to come down here. It'd be a miracle if I don't put my arm in this before the end. Okay, I'm just going to follow that around roughly there. Now I can just blend that so that as it goes into this section here, it'll just fade it off.
Mel says it's great that you're back. And yes, it's my fault.
Yeah. It's been a long road to get back to this point, hasn't it, Ian? So bit of a nasty one, isn't it? But you did alright. It's just me. Okay, so I'm going to do the same to my hairline at the top here too. But this time we can go a bit bigger so that it gets the feeling that it's away from us. So you can start to include a bit of shading that way, and make sure that when you do this that you go off your edge at the top here. Otherwise it kind of looks like it's just stopped and it's a bit weird. And then again, we can pick out the detailing in our cogs if you wish, or for that one, if you want to push it into the background, you can do. At this point, the choice is yours. A little bit more colour, I think, just down here, just as it's starting to tuck back behind this big cog here. So this is going to be a bit like a headphone.
Say hello to Caroline.
Hello, Caroline. So there we go. Now just in there, there's a little bit that needs a bit of picking out. So we're just going to go in there. Like that, to emphasise this detail, because we've got this lovely hydrangea bit just in there, so it can go around there like so. And there's a little bit that comes round there, but as it starts to do that, we can start to use our water just to blend that back out a bit. So it gets a bit softer. So we're just picking it up closer in the shadow down here. And again, just blend that bit there so it blends back into our hair. There we go. So I quite like how that's working so far. So So that's the easy bit. And now we've got to worry about her face details and how we're going to do shading, things like that. So let's give this a good wash.
I think it looks funky like that. Just,
Yeah, who thinks that's where you'd stop? Take a vote. Okay. Now, because I've got my little bit of watered down paint just here, what I'm going to do is just clean up so I don't. Ah. Night night, Lydia. Okay. Probably going to make the camera wobble. There we go.
more on the desk. Yeah. Your monitor's wobbling well, but the camera's just staying put.
Okay, so next bit I want to do.
Angela says, hello, sorry I'm late.
Oh, that's okay. So let's go for our two skin tones. Now, I'm not looking to block out all that lovely background entirely, but I do want to try and bring a bit of form out in the face, otherwise it's going to look a bit ghostly and a little bit weird. So let's go for our little brush to start with, and I'm going to come into our little shaded area here. Now the benefit of using these paints so that you're doing lots of thin coats is that it should be quite easy for it to all be dry by the time you switch colours. But if you're working a little bit thicker, just make sure that you are either heat setting it very gently or allowing those layers time to dry.
Hello? Yeah, up on the top floor.
So as it moves up, I'm just going to get my clean brush and just blend that back in. So,
Alright, cheers, thank you.
so I'm just going to put a little bit more colour just on this outside edge here, and so that's where your face would curve back around. So if we've got our light hitting this way, we can get a little bit of shadow on the edge. Back to our clean brush and we can blend again. So you can see I'm not eradicating that background layer, it's just literally almost highlighting it and emphasising it. So I'm making sure that I'm keeping things like the runs in. And then even this detail here that we've got in the middle of the face, we can still do a little bit of painting around if you wish. I'm going to blend that back that way.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So I'm just going to go down the side of the nose, and this works out really well. So if we look at the detail in the stencil, it actually almost follows where the nose will go. So it's nice and easy to just go, okay, I'm going to follow that shape round there, and that's where my nose is. A little bit more under the eye here as well. and down into there. Now for under the nose, again we can follow that shape. And we can blend that colour out. And we've got a shadow lip there and a bit more round this way. Not living too bad. And we're going to do the same, following the cheek and down this side of the face. So to start with, I'm just going to take it as a solid line and then we can blend after. Now we've still got a blush to put on at this point, but it's a good idea to do this in skin tone first, so we can see where we're going, and then we can work out the blush bit after. A little bit more under the eye here as well. Don't want to make her look like she's got too much of her bags under her eyes, but at the same point there would naturally be a little bit of shadow there.
It's just how we're all feeling.
Yeah. Follow that right down to her jawline. I'm just going to go around this little bit of a circle we've got there. And my brush is starting to dry up a little bit, so just add a bit more water. And just blend that out. Again, going to go round the cog. And round the shape there. And blend. Now we can start to work out where my mouth's going, and you can be as stylised as you want. And at any point, if you need to change something, then just change it. Don't get too bogged down with it being how you initially planned. So I think there, I'm just going to put in a bit more colour because I'm going to change that outline. Like so. Now if you have got explosion powders on your canvas, what you can find is that they're going to start interacting a little bit with your paint. That's fine, just work with it. And pop a little bit up this side too. And we can blend that in.
It looks like she's wearing a bubble gum.
Because we haven't got the lips in yet. Okay. So I'm going to come back up to her eye on this side. Again, a little bit of paint. And we can blend if you want to. I'm just going to add a bit more up above that line. And then just blend that back out. So you can always go back to the pearl if you need to put any highlights in, particularly where just underneath the brow. And put some more over here so that we start to pull out the rest of the outline of our eye. Like so. Okay. So as we move into this cheek section here, we've got lots of detail going on. So you need to decide whether you want to leave that emphasised or if you want to knock it back a bit. So I am going to start to pull out some of this detail here so that we're emphasising this texture. And I can just use my damp brush just to blend that in. Now, you might find that you get a few harsh lines, so it's just where it's interacting with the layers below. So if you do want to blend those back in, you just need to use a little bit more paint and almost paint over that edge. So underneath, I'm going to add a bit more going in here and around the cog. But I also want to try and keep a little bit of this resist going on as well. So just going to try and get it into these nooks and crannies in our resist. So follow around the shape of our hydrangea petals. And this is going to kind of mimic what we've got going on in the hair then as well. And that little centre dot. Sometimes it's not always easy to see where these things should end, but try and just do your best guesstimate. There we go. Now, this bit here where it's a lot darker is where I've actually used gel medium for a stencil. So if you let it sort of almost dry, give it a little blast with your heat gun just to finish it off, then spray it. It's going to soak up that spray so that you have this much darker colour compared to what is around it. So it's almost like the reverse of a resist. I'm just going to carry on following around the edge of our cog, which, as I said, I'm going to treat as if it's a pair of headphones. Try not to let it go too far before you just do a little bit of blending, otherwise you can find that you end up tying yourself into kind of a tide line. If you blend out, you can always go, well, actually I still want that to continue a bit further, and just add some more paint. Whereas if you carry on going and don't blend, sometimes it's a bit harder to try and go back, because once our acrylic is dry, it's dry. That's it, there's no reactivating it.
Oh.
Okay. So there's a little bit under here that I haven't quite got. There we go. And I'm going to take a little bit of that colour up over that shape, so we start to emphasise that a little bit, like so. Back into the water, and let's just blend that edge there, otherwise it looks a bit weird, like we're outlining rather than emphasising. Let's just drop a little bit in there, and then that again. So I'm just going to blend that back off that cheek a little. It was a bit harsh. So this is all being done so far at this point with the chalky version of Naked. And then we can come back and put some crackle in if we need to. Just going to lift a little bit of that colour out. It's just a little bit too strong. So it has a bit more of a blend. There we go. Let's put that. Okay. Now, just before I go and change brushes, I have got her neck mapped out as well. So we can just pop that in and blend that out. So we're gonna kind of has that colour fading out as we get towards the bottom.
I can read that one.
Thank you, Caroline, that's a lovely comment. Okay, so as we start to head down towards the bottom now, we're just going to lighten those colours so we start to let it all fade away at the bottom, which may or may not work for your particular composition. You might find it with some that you want to go darker as you get around the edges, so you kind of create like a vignette effect. So for this particular nugget, I'm going to paint around the outside rather than trying to go over the top. Yeah.
Looks like she's using a pacifier.
I'm going to sort them out that in a little bit, stop teasing
I
her.
like it. It looks cool.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly give my brushes a bit of a wash, even though the next paint I use is going to have the same colour because it's a different formulation. You do want to be cleaning your brushes between so that you're not cross-contaminating.
Just put your lids in so you don't get confused.
Yes. So I try to only have one pot open at a time, otherwise it does get confusing quite quickly. There's always one. Okay. So
Which one's this?
this is still naked, but this is in the crackle. So we can start to include a bit of texture. This time I'm going to go with a bit of a finer brush so that I can just paint my crackle in. So whereas before we were blending with our paint, this time I'm going to try as much as possible to leave it at its full power so that it does its crackle. And it's quite a subtle crackle as well, so it's not like you can look like, you know, the desert on a I can pop a lip up into the brow area. And I'm still kind of painting around a few of the details so that I'm keeping that texture without blotting it all out. Especially after we've gone to all that trouble blending it in elsewhere. And I'm going to pop some of this lighter colour down her nose. So at this point I haven't put barely any colour on her nose. So we want to try and keep it into the light tones down this right hand edge so that it starts to stick out from the cheek, the other side of it. Now I'm going to pull out detail of our stencil. Like so. So that we start to have this sense of this stencil going into her forehead, which is really pretty. And the placement was perfect, I have to say. I'm just going to follow that pattern around. So I'm just literally using grooves now that are already on my canvas to kind of trace where that goes. A little bit more just there. Just going to soften that. Same bit I'm going to soften just there. So get a hint of that colour, but without it being quite so strong. I need just a little bit more paint on the brush. There we go. So we've pulled out some of that detail, but not all of it. So now where we've blended this bit, we can start to do some areas of crackle. So this is useful where you've got areas of colour that don't think are quite working. And a tiny bit of a highlight just there. A little bit along the bottom edge of that nose. And there we go. So far I think I'm quite happy with that. Now while I've got my brush on that colour, I'm going to use that same colour over one of my die cuts, so in this case the little cog I've got down the bottom, so that I get some texture starting to happen on that cog. So once you've decided on a colour palette, try and stick to it. So don't think, oh, it's a cog, it's got to be silver or brass. Doesn't have to be at all. So I'm just going to apply it a little bit thicker on here, so I get a bit more of a crackle. Okay, so let's pick a couple of the elements from our background outside of our Facebook and put colour in. So I'm just going to use onto the little screw head. Like so. And we can even go onto our raised cog here.
Louise has got to go. It's looking good.
Thank you, Louise, and I will see you soon. There we go. So we've got 1, 2, 3, which is a really good way of balancing out how you're using your colours. So milk and brush clean, and we can change colour. So now I'm going to go to Tickled to do the blush. So this is like a pale pink colour. So it's going to work well with our background. It's also quite translucent, so that when we're painting with it, it's not going to need a lot of water to soften it. So you can see, compared to the naked, when we brush it on, it's quite quickly kind of blend into that background by comparison. Okay. So if there's any bits that you've kind of formed harsh lines on you want to blend, it's quite a good one for that, because it's got that translucency to it, so you can build up coats of it. I'm also going to use it over my lip area, just lightly to start with. And it's a good idea to kind of do like a lighter backdrop for the lips, because straight away you can see if there's anything wrong with the profile of them. So if you want to change anything, it's a good opportunity to do so. So where I did that extra line before, I'm just going to tidy that up with the Tickled. Okay. So at the moment that's probably looking a bit lost, but from what I can see a little bit clearer. So if I bring that up, let's see if I can. It's a bit hard to see. But now I'm going to go to Get Metalled Rose. So this is going to have a good amount of shimmer. So it makes it a good lippy colour. So look at that gorgeousness. So again, just make sure we clean our brush. And let's pick up a little bit of our colour. I'm going to start by following the centre line of the lip, so where the two lips meet. Now we get metalled, we can go a bit darker and a bit stronger, a bit thicker, so getting a bit more of that colour. But because we put our tickled underneath, we can see exactly where we want to go, and we know we're getting it right first time. So follow that around there. Now, I may want to put a little bit darker colour with that. What I'm going to do is wait until I do the eyes. So what we could do is use the colour that I want to use in the eyes as a shadow for the lips. And hopefully by then our metalled will be nice and dry. With a nice metallic sheen. Okay, and while that's drying, let's again go and pick out some different die cuts that we can use our get metalled on. So the only colour that I wouldn't necessarily use for this is the Russian, because it's going to be quite strong. And let's go for this one over here. Okay. And I'm going to go for this cog right in the middle. Be brave. So how are we doing for timing in?
If you want to stick it to an hour, you've got about 7 minutes left.
7 minutes? Oh my geez. Better give us some eyes then. Because at the moment, you can't really see them.
So it looks good on camera.
Yeah. In real life it's a bit, it's not quite that vivid, is it? It's weird. So some things come out more on the camera than others there. Now let's get the right one. So I'm going to put a little bit of Artemis onto my mat, and we can give it a little squirty of water. And this is going to give us our purple tone. So where we've got these purpley tones in the background, this all comes from Artemis. So again, because we've got quite a watery paint, you just give your brush a bit of a roll, and then we can go and take that into the iris of the eye. Now you want to skip the little highlight. Now you want that highlight of the eye to be the brightest thing on your painting, really. So what I would say is, rather than be tempted to use pearl to bring out that highlight, use something like a white paint pen. And I'll say that just in case I don't get around to doing it tonight. Okay. So now I'm just going to dip back into that paint, and we can start to put some of that colour back into our centre line. Now you can see that where you have like a slight gap between the two lips, it's going to sit into that and give you an outline without having to go around and do liner. I'm going to take a little bit around the bottom of the lip too, and a little bit around the top here, just to give it a little bit of a emphasis there, like so. What do we think? It's weird because it looks one thing on screen and then you look at it and it's like, oh, that's different. So again, even though it's on this watery mix, we can do the same kind of approach. So pick a die cut and pop that on there. And we can pop colour on this one here. And you're going to see that as it starts to dry, it's going to pick out any of the kind of resist that's going on underneath. So you're not going to get just a flat colour. And now we have a decision with our big cog as to whether we're going to paint our big cog purple to pull that cog out from the background, or if we're going to paint the background to make the cog pop. So, you want to paint the cog? Okay, I paint the cog.
You don't have to. You're painting, don't ruin it just because I said so. You do what you want to do if you're painting.
Oh, go on. I'll be brave and do the cog.
That Caroline at the bottom that said fabulous.
Yes, it is Caroline. Thank you, Caroline. So it's just that off to one side, so you kind of got a bit of a funny angle on you to read comments.
Normally turn the screen, don't I?
Yeah, you do normally turn the screen, yeah. So you're going to find, because this is like watercolour, and I think that resisted the sprays, it's going to extra resist your watercolour. So you get a much stronger contrast by doing this step. But I'm starting to run out of a bit of colour, so we can go back and we can just make a bit more. So one of the things I do is have like little pots with the colour pre-made. I actually used up the two of my pots today doing the background. So that's on my to-do list, to refresh my watercolour pots. Doesn't hurt to do that every so often though, unless you're using distilled water. You will find that over time that water will stagnate, so it's always good to kind of keep them moving. Okay, now the sprays are water reactive to a certain extent, so where you've got like the mica, you can find that when you do this step it moves it around a little bit. So if there's anything texture wise you're particularly tied to, then instead of doing the cog like I'm doing at the moment, do the background instead. Either way will have a similar effect of making this kind of step out from behind our main icon. Just going to take care going around here where we've got the interaction of the other cog, so that we keep our contrast there. There we go. Round, around. So what I did, going back to my base layer, is after I'd stuck down all my dyes and the die cuts and done all the texture paste, is once that's all dry, is if you just brush over some areas with gesso, you'll find that creates more of a brushstroke texture in your background. So that's when you can start to see things like this happening. That's where we've actually got a bit of gesso over our card in places, whereas others it's missing, and you'll find that you get a contrast between the two. Same over here, where we've got this big lighter patch. That's just gesso. So the die cuts themselves are done with the Dolly Dimples card, I believe. I'm sure Mel could confirm that when she comes back. Okay. Just going to pick out a little bit of detail on this cog here, where I can kind of emphasise the shape where our face would be. So it's going to look like our cog is a little bit translucent, and you can see the shape beneath. And we can shade in a few more of these religious details if we want, just to bring them out just that little bit more. Useful if there's any bits that your spray's kind of missed. And there we go. So try not to fiddle. Okay.
Not the world's greatest fiddler.
Yep. There's still some bits I'm thinking that I could do with going back and just adding a little bit more black to. But we'll see how it goes.
Just got light.
There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause it there, let it dry, and then next week I will finish that off and show you it in its frame. So I hope you've enjoyed this evening's little bit of a painting session, and we'll be back next week. Take care for now, and